Well, today we're going to look at how I drew my latest digital picture, Rose Moon, and you'll find out how it got that name at the end of the video. But this is the photo I worked from. It's downloaded from Pixabay, and I'll put a link to that just below this video, so you can get it if you'd like to work along. I used Procreate software, and I'll tell you more about what I did and how I did it as we go on. Let's shrink that image down for starters. Now, I'm just starting out with a rough sketch of the rose. I'm using a black background and kind of a light gray, and I'm just using a pencil tool that is going to give me again, a really rough outline. I don't need a lot of details at this point because that's all going to come in the painting process. So I look for the big shapes, and occasionally you'll see a little flash like that where I bring up the image, the reference image, because I don't always have that in front of me when I'm working. But once I have my sketch, I begin to move on to coloring. Now, one thing that's really important if you're working digitally is to make use of layers. Now, if you've watched some of my other videos, you know I always say, when possible, work back to front. So you'll see that I'm going to be drawing all of these flower petals in the order of back to front, the furthest ones away. I'm going to draw first, and there are times actually when I move layers around where I've drawn one that's on top and I move it to where it's further back. But you won't be able to see most of that. You'll just see as I draw, and you'll see the effects. Now, I just drew the stem in. I'm using the pastel tool for most of this, and I like it because it's really close to working with chalk. So I always start with a base color, and then I'll come in with a little highlighting and smooth it out. And that's what I'm doing now with the other, I don't know what to call it, a petal cover, I guess. These are the little parts of the rose that covered the petal, covered the bulb or the rose bulb before it opened up. And they're kind of a, if you look at the photo, they're kind of a brownish color because they've sort of dried out. So I'm just laying in the basic colors as I see them, and then I blend them softly, and I'm adding just a little bit of detail on here to give that a little bit better feel near the tips, kind of a sharp feel. So I've gone into the first petal that I draw, and I'm kind of violating my rule here because this is actually way in the front as opposed to the rest of the rose. But I'm kind of looking at the stem and those two little brown elements and this petal as one unit. And so I'm drawing those three together. Sometimes I will turn the sketch off just so I can focus on the main thing I'm drawing. And here I have laid in several shades of red and a little bit of kind of off-white. I'm just going to come in and sharpen it up. And now I've brought the sketch back, and what I do with each of these petals is I draw each one individually, and once I get the base color in, then I turn on a feature called lock transparency, and it's different depending on what digital software you're using. Sometimes it's called alpha lock, but most of the time it's called lock transparency. And what that does is it locks the transparent pixels, in other words, the pixels that have not been drawn on, so that I can focus completely on that petal and not worry about drawing outside of the lines that I've already laid down. So you'll see that I always go ahead and lay a base color in, just like I'm doing here. And once I have that in, then I turn on the lock transparency. Now I do kind of refine the edges a little bit, as you'll see. That's what I'm doing here. And to do that, I've switched actually away from the pastel brush to a basically a colored pencil type brush. I'm using the 6B pencil. Now the transparency is locked, so I'm coming in and I'm again laying in uh, different values and different shades. I don't just adjust the value here. I want a little bit of variety. If you look at the reference photo, you see that it's not just one flat shade of red. So I add some definition with the darker values, and then I will pull it in and just kind of smooth that over. I do use a blending brush for portions of this, but for the most part, it's just the pastel tool, the blending brush, lock transparency. I do occasionally use an airbrush tool, but most of the time it's just laying in the base coat like I'm doing here, excuse me, and then once I have it smoothed over and I have the edges refined, then again I turn on Alpha Lock, and that lets me begin to work details in without worrying about getting outside of where I've been trying to draw. Uh, One of the reasons I love doing roses is it's great for developing a feel for drawing abstract shapes, because even though I'm painting something, I break it down to the individual petals, the individual shapes, and that's really what I'm focusing on as I draw. I'm building this rose literally petal by petal as I draw or paint it. Okay, so you can see I'm at the very, very innermost part of the rose. And that one didn't have a lot of detail, so I quickly add the next layer in. And again, working behind that part that I just did, that little part in the center, actually again in front. So I don't always work back to front, but most of the time I do. And then sometimes you get that depth feel just by laying the colors uh, in and pulling them in the direction of the petal. Like in this case, the dark is down near the bottom, so I will lay that darker tone in, and then I'll use a blender and I'll bring it up a little, just brush it up toward the outside. And I'm doing the same thing here with this back petal and adding a little bit more darkness in. And then a little bit from the front, or from the top, the outside of the petals, I guess I would say. Excuse me. And I, at times, try to work on some of the detail. Here I'm coming in with a big front petal. This one's actually fairly detailed, but again, I follow the same pattern. I'm going to lay in the darks, and I'm going to just pull those out toward the outside of the petal. But you'll notice on the right side of that petal, it's actually lighter because of the way the light is hitting it. And I've drawn in a little crease at the petal tip there, adding a little bit more shadowing in and pulling that down toward the main part of the flower. And then I've got one more petal I've got to draw in here. So again, same pattern. I lay the base coat in, and then I add in my darker values, pull those out. And again, I'm using a blending brush for this part. And then I add my lighter values, pull those in or wherever they need to go. Now you notice I've already removed the rose, and I'm drawing some stars here. I'm using star brush, and I used a moon stamp up there. I just decided I wanted a different background for this, other than just a black background, and I thought a kind of a starry sky would be cool. So I have a number of different star brushes, and I've tried those, found the one that I like. And now I'm adding a little bit of cloud or nebula in, kind of a Milky Way effect, although it doesn't really replicate the Milky Way. And I'm using some light blue and some pink. Now these are star stamps, which let me add individual stars in. Then I'm going to add in a moon here. I don't want the moon to be too big, so I made it fairly small, and that's it. That is Rose Moon. I hope you enjoyed watching this drawing, and I hope you'll try a few things like this. It's kind of fun, and it's always a challenge. Thanks for watching. I'm Jim Pence with See the Light. See you next time.